Welcome back to the Andrew Haines Show. On today's episode, we were able to share some time with Bill Guertin, the 800-pound gorilla of sales performance. As a sales expert, author, keynote speaker, and master sales trainer, Bill has partnered with over 100 sports and entertainment organizations to improve their people and their profits. In the show, Bill and Andrew dig into Bill's story and how he found his way into being a sales trainer for professional sports teams, the differences between sales strategies in major leagues and minor leagues, and what it takes to carve out a career and be a leader in major league sports. We hope you enjoy.
Let's get started. Thanks for joining me today. I'd love to get started just to kind of get to know your journey from where you began and how you got into the sports world.
Well, I really started not really wanting to be in sports at all. I was a decent basketball player, but I was not a sports nut. I was a big fan, just like everybody else, but I did not have this burning desire to get into business. My burning desire was in radio. That's what I wanted to be. At 16, I was the youngest licensed radio broadcaster in the state of Illinois, and that was my destiny. I was going to be the next Larry Lujak, who at that time was the big top 40 DJ at WLS in Chicago. And at 21, I figured out where the money was, and it wasn't on the air. It was really in the sales department. And so I pivoted to do some sales work. I had a couple of businesses in college. Actually, I did a custom t-shirt business and a couple of other things. So I was kind of a serial entrepreneur from a very young age. And so
I like it.
The sales thing was not foreign to me. I just hadn't really thought of it as a career. And so I began in the ad sales department of the station that I was first on, WVYG in Kankakee, Illinois. 50,000 watt blowtorch. And I spent 25 years in broadcast media. I became sales manager, then general manager of a station, actually owned a piece of a station in Joliet for some time. And then I saw the iPod. And I really felt as though the iPod was going to be the death of local radio. Now, I overreacted, I'm sure, now looking back at it, but I really felt as though having 1,000 songs in your pocket meant that no one would need to listen to the radio for music or entertainment. And so I began to look for an alternative to where I could be relevant and be something that I could feel as though I could make a difference in. And I was introduced to training, and I wanted to be a speaker. I wanted to be a published author, all these different things that I had going on. And all of us sometimes suffer from this over-choice thing, right? What do we do next? We got all these things that we choose from. Well, I was going to a dinner party at a friend's house who was about to take over the presidency of a local bank. His father had been very successful. He's a very humble guy. He was ready to take over this bank, but customer service was a big deal for them. And so he's, Bill, you're really a good speaker. You're eloquent. Would you mind taking this book home that I had? It was called the 7 Keys to Disney Success by Tom Kennellan. He said, I need to have this trained to my staff. Would you be interested in taking a hack at that? And he had known that I wanted to be a speaker and a trainer at some point. And so I took it back home, read it. There was even a little cookbook in the back as to how to do it. So I said, absolutely, I'll give it a shot. And so I put some graphics together. I did this whole thing up. And then I trained 1/3 of the bank at a time because they had to keep the bank open, of course. And so I did it 3 different times. And it was such a rush. I really enjoyed it. And so I went back to Jeff, my friend, 6 months later, and I said, I really might want to do this full time. Would you mind if I used that program? And he looked right at me and said, I thought you'd never ask. I said, you really have a gift for this. But you can't see any other banks for a year. That's my competitive thing. You can't do that. Go over to anybody else. I said, no, that's no problem. So long story short, I ended up at an opportunity then to work with the president, the Chamber of Commerce in a southern suburb. And the gentleman in the audience happened to be the director of ticket sales for the White Sox. And this is, by the way, this is a lesson for everybody that doesn't think that one thing builds on another in your life. The guy in the White Sox comes up. I have no idea why he was there to this day. Comes up, he hands me his card. He says, we could use a guy like you with your energy and enthusiasm in ticket sales because we have guys, people that travel around the country that do training of ticket sales guys. And we could use a guy with your kind of chutzpah in what you do. And for me, it was, I had no idea. No idea. And so that became my new quest. I was going to become a ticket sales trainer for a professional sports team in some capacity. Well, 6 months go by. I'm trying to call Tom Sheridan, the ticker at the White Sox. He doesn't call me back. Happens to be the year the White Sox hosted the World Series, so he has got no time for me at all. So I'm thinking, my dreams have been dashed. Well, it's about 9 months into this. I get a call from the Chicago Bulls. Dave Dowd, who's the director of ticket sales there, said, hey, I was talking to Tom Sheridan. For those of you who don't know, Jerry Reinsdorf is a common thread. He owns both the Bulls and the White Sox. Yep. And so they talk a lot back and forth about things, which is another lesson about how the importance of word of mouth can help you in your career. Dave said, I'm looking for a new trainer. We've used a few over the years, and I haven't really liked what I had. Would you be interested in this 3-day sales training session and put a bid in for that? I said, the smartest question I ever asked was, well, what sort of budget do you have to do something like that?
It's the most important one sometimes.
Well, I didn't know at the time, but it happened to work out. So he shot me this number, and it was really low for 3 days' work. But this is my start, right? So I just blurted out, well, I can do it for that. So you can't? Yeah. So he said, okay, you got the job. And I hung up the phone and I said, holy crap, what do I do now? So this is that perfect scenario of jump and the net will appear. And so I jumped. And so I had 6 months, which was fortunate. I had, they gave me some material that they wanted me to incorporate in the program, and I put in my own things because I had done a lot of sales training in radio with the staff that I had in the ad sales department. So it was a combination of that and the Bulls material that I went and presented. And this is back in now 2004 in doing that presentation, and did such a good job that they have hired me every year ever since. And this is now 17 years. It's my longest running client. I will never, ever be ungrateful for that first chance, because when I learned that the NBA was really the de facto league that everyone looked at for new ideas and inspiration, I then had others call me from Major League Baseball, from minor league baseball, and say, hey, I understand you work for the NBA, blah, 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 blah. And now I've had the good fortune to work with over 100 teams through just about every major or minor league in North America. And now even with Liga MX and Ascenso MX down in Mexico, the premier Mexican soccer league.
That's amazing. And, being the entrepreneur that you are, I mean, pivoting on the spot, really. I mean, especially when you weren't, targeting that market. So
yes, it's amazing what happens in your career when you keep your eyes open for things, that you don't always look for everything, but if something comes your way, that you have a chance to at least think about it. About 5 years ago, I was given the chance to work with an individual who was having a consulting job in Mexico. Now, I'd never been south of the border 5 years ago. A little nervous about it, a little wigged out. You never know what's going to happen in a foreign country, right? Mexico, all the weird things that go on there. So I took the job. It was working with one team in the Mexican soccer league called Santos Laguna. It's a team in Torreon, which is right smack dab in the middle of Mexico. This is not Cancun. Right?
No pretty beaches.
But it has a gorgeous stadium. They just hadn't been able to fill the stadium. And so this business partner that I ended up in business with, his name is Doug Quinn, said, hey, come on down. We need a contract sales trainer to come and do this 3 different times. And so we did. And it was incredibly successful. We increased ticket sales 30 to 40%. They had wonderful attendance. Beautiful 30,000 seat stadium, was now close to capacity. And so the entire league took note and said, hey, we'd like you to do that for all of us. And so long story short, it really, we ended up working together down there quite a bit. He looked at the stuff I did and said, man, we got to bottle you somehow. We got to be able to do this in a scalable way. And that's really the way Doug thinks. Doug is a very big thinker. I'm really more of a doer in a smaller way. And so the two of us, combined with a few other partners, started what we called the Inspiration Sports Business Institute, or ISBI 360. And it is a digital learning platform which standardizes and shrinks down all of the lessons that I train live into small, what we call micro learning bites, 10 minutes or less at a time.
Nice.
And so, Andrew, you know this for sure. And I know many other managers watching this. Your salespeople have very little patience to watch anything longer than 10 minutes.
Yep.
This is the YouTube generation. And so what we did is create these small incremental bites that people can incorporate into their day right away. And so we have now built 7 different courses relative to specifically sports and entertainment. So we have 3 levels of ticket sales, we have sponsorship, we have leadership, we have social media, and customer service, all of which are on these small incremental micro learning bites. And we've had, it was a tough go at first because people were, holding on to their live trainers, and I was one of them. But now with everything that's happened with the pandemic, people are looking at us like geniuses. Like, oh, wow.
Great timing. Yeah. How about that?
It's like everybody kind of figured out, oh, now we know what you're talking about. And
did you see this coming? What was going on?
We can't promise any sort of prognostication that we had did this happen. But what ends up happening is that this whole situation has legitimized the value of virtual training. And we've been grateful that our system has been used very, very successfully throughout this thing and will be used very successfully going forward.
On the online program, is that more geared towards, like a team purchasing for their staff, or can just people in their careers on their own purchase it as well? How's that set up?
That's a great question, Andrew. We actually had people come to us and say, do you have a small version for us that we could take and then maybe mold into a career? And so we actually have created the ISBI Academy, which is a smaller kind of the essence of ticket sales, because that's where the majority of the entry-level positions are, to be able to have someone who wants to be able to get into that, do that. We have it at isbi360.com for people to take a look at that. But if you're not in sports right now and you really want to be, we have a way in for you. Almost 50% of the available jobs in sports at any given moment are in the sales department. And it is the simplest, the easiest, the most efficient way in which to get into sports.
What do you think the difference just between the leagues that you've worked? Like I mentioned earlier, I've got a goal of, becoming an executive at a major league level. I've always been at the minor league level. What kind of differences when you're out training, if any, do you see and kind of focus on?
Well, there's quite a bit. The titles really get different as you rise up from minor leagues to major leagues. And so the vice president of sales at the New York Yankees is a very different job than the vice president of sales at, perhaps an independent wood bat league team.
Right.
And the requirements are much different and the responsibilities are much different. But the jobs themselves, if you were to compare the minor leagues to the major leagues, if you don't know exactly what you want to do, and you are kind of a jack of all trades, you just kind of want to get your hands dirty, involved in sports and try to do a little bit of everything, boy, minor league sports are all for you. Because
you'll be doing everything, that's for sure.
Every hour, you're doing something different. You've got 10 group sales calls, and the UPS truck is here. We got to unload the bobbleheads. Oh, and by the way, it's going to rain, so we got to go pull the tarp. I mean, there's all sorts of things, and it seems like a madhouse most of the time. But for some, it's a real rush. And if you're listening now and you're thinking, oh yeah, that's for me, that would be awesome, then minor league sports would be a perfect place for you to cut your teeth. Now, most people can't keep that up for 10 years. So you'll spend some time doing that and then potentially maybe move into another role, another position. The good news is many times you're exposed to sponsors and other people within the ballpark or wherever you happen to work that will look at you and see your work ethic and said, I'd like you to come work for me. And so many people find work outside of baseball or whatever you happen to work in at one of the sponsors or a person who happens to have been sold season tickets by you, or they get to know you in some way. So you're always networking, just like that guy was in the back of the room for me from the White Sox when I was doing a customer service session. You just never know who's watching. So getting good at minor league sports, doing as good as you can at any moment, people are always going to be watching you. But if you do decide to go to the majors, here's the major difference that happens. Rather than being a generalist, when you get into the major league sports, people become specialists. And so if you're doing season ticket sales, for example, in a major league sports, there's going to be anywhere from 4 to 20 people on the staff doing nothing but ticket sales. And you're going to sit your ass in that chair and you're going to make 100 dials a day and you're going to sell nothing but doing that. If the UPS truck comes, we have people for that.
Right.
And so you don't have that flexibility to be able to say, oh, I can probably blow this off, or I could probably go do something else. And for people that have this whole shiny butterfly syndrome, that they have to go do something every hour, this role is not for you. But the major league sports reward people who we call grinders, who can be on the phones constantly and just keep going and doing the same thing and having the diligence and patience to keep at it over and over again. Not everybody takes breaks now and then, but I think you understand what I mean. There's a single task, you're focused on it day in and day out. Now, there are some things that change. You might be selling a different way. There may be a different package you're selling that month. It may be a different emphasis. It might be more groups one month, and there might be something else. But again, at the sports level, at the major league level, they have people already doing group sales as a specialty. So you may be 12 months a year selling group sales and doing different elements leading up to those group outings that you would be involved in 12 months a year. But that's the biggest difference I see, Andrew, is that you become a generalist in minor leagues and a specialist in the major leagues.
Yeah. And even some of the minor leagues are going that way, some of the bigger ones, I've noticed in baseball specifically. But yeah, that's kind of been my challenge with my career, because I've been a generalist. I've been the GM. And so going to that next level for me is, what area do I want to focus on? And
now you got to pick a lane, I'm afraid, at that point, and say, I need to do this.
Yep.
I would tell you, though, one of the things that there are a couple of people in my world that I've gotten to know. Brad Lott is one of those, and he has no idea that I'm talking about him right now. And this will be very interesting. But Brad Lott worked for many years at the Tampa Bay Lightning and chose to be an executive in every one of the different departments within the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was director of ticket sales, then was director of service operations, then director of the facility at a fairly decently high level. But he was hired in, and he told them that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to get experience in each one of these so that he could then move on and become a higher level, either GM or president of a team, to have the kinds of experience in each one of the departments. And he then moved on and is now with the Detroit Pistons in a very senior vice presidential type role. And all of those things that he had done prior to that led him to that position that he's in today. What he did with his employer, though, and I thought was really smart, is that he told them up front, here's my plan. And he was very specific with that plan. And the employer, fortunately, allowed him the latitude to be able to move into those because the leadership was needed at those times. So he had several things going for him. He had a plan, but he also had the ability to do those jobs. And he was an excellent people person. And so he had all the skills. So if somebody comes in and says, you want to do it, but you stink at it, it would have to rescind all these offers that they had given and tell them, hey, maybe we should rethink this. But that worked out well for him. And, so indeed, if there's anybody listening that might have an interest, let your employer know up front what your plans are.
Yeah. I like to do that with all my staff too, is what are your career goals? How can I help you achieve those? And it's always fun to watch them grow in their careers. So I've seen, people start as interns and then work for a few years, work their way up a few levels, and then move on to a major league level or something else. So for me, that's always been really rewarding.
Yes.
What do you think on the importance just of practice and training, especially, on the ticketing side?
You can't get enough of it. And most of the very best do it every week, whether it's role play or back and forth, or do just a snippet, maybe an objection handling exercise. It doesn't have to be during a weekly sales meeting, but typically the very best teams do a 10 or 15 minute, we're going to train right now on this specific objection. It might have to do with something that's very topical for the market in a particular instance. Perhaps there's some incident that happened. Let's say there was some sort of somebody accosted somebody in the parking lot of your stadium. Heaven forbid that would happen to you, but let's say that happens. And so that becomes an objection in a sales environment where you may have to address that. And so training specifically to how to say the right words in that situation when someone objects about the violence that they've heard about in your parking lot. But to be able to continually hone and refine what you do, I think is absolutely critical for people's success. Even if you don't get that sort of training at your own place, find it yourself. Go out and work with someone who's a partner with you, maybe who works in the next cubicle next to you, to be able to record, and then each of you kind of dissect the other's calls to do that. If you can't find someone to do that, here's a strong suggestion that I have that you can do right now. All of you have a cell phone. It has a little record function on it, audio recorder, not video, but nobody ever uses it, ever, because that's so 1990. But if you put the recorder on just 20 minutes each day, turn the recorder on, set it next to your phone, and just let it run. Turn it off, and then on the way home, when we get all back to working in a place and then having to drive home, listen to yourself. It is the single best way in which to improve and to hear how you sound. Now, many of you are going to say, I don't want to hear that, and take the time to do that. So you're going to record yourself a whole bunch of times and never listen to yourself. Please don't get into that trap. Listen to your own voice. It's painful, but it's huge in allowing you to see, because many of us think, we sound really energetic. We sound great. We never use the word
right. Yeah. Oh, that's my worst. It's fun. Like, we used to have, with my old team, we had a phone system that would record our calls. And it was probably one of the best tools that we had, because every week I would pick out some great calls, and then I would also pick out some pretty bad ones. Yeah. And just kind of, going over them, and like what you said, overcoming the objections. And up here in Fredericksburg, that's what we started on, because when I first got here, the big issue was the stadium. We're building a brand new stadium. It doesn't look anywhere close to being done at that point. And it does sit down in, and, they've heard of teams coming for years and years. And there was a lot of hesitance because of that. And so that was one of the big things. We did a lot of role play at the end of our weekly partnership meeting regarding that. And it's definitely helped.
That's great. Well, the only way you get better is by training and trying things. If you're afraid to do that with somebody else, and you think, I'm so embarrassed, I'm with my friends, I don't want to have them hear me, they're going to hear you in the office anyway. They're going to hear you everywhere. Your customers are going to hear you. It isn't like you do this in a vacuum. So the better you can get at that, the more successful you will be. One of the tenets of improv comedy, which I use a lot in my live training programs, is yes and. For those who've studied that, you know what I mean, that anyone if you're with two people and it's two guys, let's say, and the one guy says to the other, doctor, I think I'm pregnant. The other guy can't say, well, you're a guy, you can't be pregnant. No, you have to roll with it and do what that is. And so in many cases, some of the things that you see improv comedians study are the very same things we as sales reps should. And so if you want to study who's really doing well in salesmanship, study the kinds of things that improv comedians study, and you will find a marked improvement in the way in which you handle people and the way in which they throw things at you.
When you wrote the 800-pound gorilla sales book, were you focused on general sales, or was that sports specific?
Well, I used a general sales topic, and I used sports examples and analogies to be able to bring it to life. And so there are stories and examples in there from people that I have known throughout my career that I have seen blossom in sales, some of which are in sports, some are not, to give people a little bit of more well-rounded look at what it is that the career really has to do with things. The 800-pound gorilla as a name, by the way, it came to me in the shower. All great ideas come to you in the shower. You ought to have a pad and paper somehow in the shower. I actually have a pad. There's a company that makes these waterproof pads with a pencil in the inside, and I give them away a lot to friends and customers and such, because those are where the best ideas are. So the definition of 800-pound gorilla is a dominant player in any marketplace whose tactics and techniques result in an unfair share of the available business. And so what I started out doing at the very beginning was helping people claim their unfair share of what it is that they had in the market. And it just so happens that my dominant place that I did most of my marketing and most of my efforts were really on the sports side. And I have never looked back. It's been such a joy to work in this industry because of the many, many people I've met that I feel so close to now and have had a great kinship with. I think I've delivered very good value, but at the same time, I've had such great support from people who love what I'm able to do for others, and now dozens, even hundreds of those whose careers have been affected by my work, which is really kind of a cool legacy to have.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure you've seen, a lot of growth from former students or people that you've been training. I'm sure they've worked their way up the ladder. Do you focus 100% on sports now, or do you still do general and other businesses as well?
No, I still do some other things, not as much, but I do some things. I have worked in banking, parks and recreation, believe it or not, a couple of other strange places that you might not expect, some in the real estate sector, have helped a little bit there. I have created, 6 months ago, I created a keynote presentation, which is not a sales how-to sort of session, which I've done a lot of, but I wanted to do something that would really suffice as a keynote. And one of the things that I've seen many, many sales reps do throughout my career, it's really been kind of the research I've been doing for this, is watching them not succeed because of right here. They had the ability, they had everything going for them, but somehow they just got inside themselves and just messed up, just could not do what it is that I knew they could do firsthand. And so I wrote a very unique keynote presentation called The 7 Voices in Your Head. And it uses sound effects and music and voices and all sorts of multimedia to be able to bring this concept to life. So I'm literally on stage and there's a sound over here and it's a voice. So this voice over here is talking to me and this voice is over here talking to me. And I debuted it for the very first time in December, worked with some speakers bureaus to get it up and running in February, and then conferences stopped. And so just like all of us in sports, we who are in the speaking business are in that same quandary. I have a lot, and this would be kind of funny. Let me share with you. I'm going to move my camera here with that.
Yes.
This is kind of the studio I'm creating now, and this is my office. Nice. So you see here, this is the teleprompter and some of the other things that I have set that I'll be doing virtual presentations from my home with in the very near future to be able to hopefully do the 7 voices virtually here and be able to do a conference in a virtual sense. So like everybody else, I'm pivoting too.
No, and I think you have to. But I think with the technology, I mean, it just opens up so many more possibilities, and especially with your online academy now. How long ago was that launched?
We launched it 3 years ago.
Okay.
And it was a chore to start. People were so used to the way they've done things in the past. And it's, and I was a trainer for that way for 15 years. I still am. And so, when I get in this business, people say, well, are you going to cannibalize your own business? I said, well, yeah, kind of. Because here's why. I would go into a place, and Andrew, you can so relate to this. You go back, I go into a team, into a town. They're all jazzed after 3 days with me. And then it might take a few weeks, might take a few months. But after a while, it's like, yeah, we kind of go back to where we were before. We're like rubber bands. We all go back to the same way we were in some shape or form. Now, many of the things I train stick, and I've heard many, many people talk to me about a technique they've used that they've really succeeded with. But when you're doing a 3-day, intense 8-hour-a-day session, only so much of that fire hose is going to get through. Yeah. And so I looked for many years for a way in which to have training stick better so that it would be more able to be incorporated and be more of a habit to them right away. And so when I joined this partnership, one of our partners is an expert in what's called micro learning. And it's that small increment over time, which is really education more like a language. You learn a language over time versus having something thrown at you multiple hours a day for 3 days. And a part of it gets in and part of it doesn't. And so I can honestly say that now I am a firm believer in the micro learning process. I've certainly done live trainings and will continue to do them, but I see the benefits of having this language style training to be able to stick better and actually produce better careers. So crazy, but that's how it's working.
No, I mean, it is. But I do think, there's still a place for, the in-person and
without a doubt,
and
yep.
Especially like, your energy, you're a great speaker, and there's just nothing better than that. But me, three days of 8-hour sessions, that's tough for me. So
there's a couple of ways in which to go about that can really break it up. And over the years, I've become a fairly good student of adult learning techniques to be able to keep it fresh and genuine, and people look forward to it. And you almost have to create this feeling of, I wonder what's next. And the very best in our industry, and I have really treated this like a career in making sure that I understand that learning techniques that work and learning techniques that don't should really be studied. I'm a member of the National Speakers Association, of which none of my compatriots are. This is something that I take very, very seriously. When I'm in front of someone, it's like an 8-hour keynote every time. And I'm exhausted at the end of the day. And for those who've ever had me in their markets and they wonder why I didn't go out to dinner with them afterwards, it wasn't that I didn't want to be with you, okay? It's that, man, I'm spent. That's all I've got. It's all I could do to go back to
I got to go recover.
Yeah, I just crash so that I can recover for the next day. You're right. But it's such a rewarding career if it's done properly. But you have to create that feeling of everyone in the room as this, I wonder what's next sort of anticipation. And so you have to surprise people every so often with some things they're not expecting, some interaction, some sort of activity, something that allows them to feel actively engaged in the process and not just being lectured to. They had plenty of that in college.
Getting past, the training and sales side, how about like leadership, from just leadership development and just, what do you think are, most important, aspects of being a effective and solid leader in this business?
In our world, Andrew, that many people are promoted from being a sales rep or somewhere less than a sales rep into a sales manager position, most often because they're the one that's left. And if you stick it out long enough, you'll be the manager. It has really very little to do with the ability they have to lead or anything. It's just if you were able to stand it for this long, you get to be the manager.
Or top sales.
Or the number one salesperson, which, the number one hamburger flipper at McDonald's sometimes makes an awful trainer of other hamburger flippers. They just happen to do what they do really, really well. Often I have seen top sales reps be far happier maintaining their top sales rep status. Yep. And after they've tried management for a couple, 3 months, they say, can I go back to the way things work? I really like my own, calling my own shots. Because very many of the top sales reps are just independent. They're almost like entrepreneurs of themselves. And they don't really get jazzed by watching other people succeed. And that's the biggest change, is to get excited for others' success versus your own. The top reps in most markets that get promoted are generally miserable because they didn't expect it to be that way. They wanted the money. They wanted, to have the ability.
They like to be number one. They like to be number one.
Feet up on the desk. They think, it's great. This is the way it's going to be. But that's not, it doesn't fulfill them like anything else. What I use, and we just put the finishing touch on this leadership program in ISBI. I'm so proud of it because it does mention many of the things that we now have to deal with after the pandemic. And but many of these same tenets are going to be true no matter what. The fundamental that we really built the entire program on, that in my training program with leadership, it's based on, is when you were a great rep, you serviced the heck out of your clients. They knew who you were. You did exactly what you needed to do. You knew all about their lives. And, when their anniversary was, you bought flowers for them and you brought it down to their chairs. Whatever it is you did, it was awesome. And in this new role, your people, the people that report to you, are now your new customers. So if you treat your people just like you expected that your customers to be treated as a rep, you'll be far better off. Understanding that that's their role, that you now serve them, not the other way around.
That's a really good way to put it, because I have been working with some younger guys on developing leadership, and the way you just put that is a great way. I tried to explain it, similar, but it's definitely, it's about being excited for their win as opposed to all about you. And it definitely is an adjustment for some, and it's not for everyone. So
Yeah, if you want to be a manager because you want to be more powerful and somehow put the plaque on your desk and be able to play Michael Scott or whatever you want to do. I mean, it's really far less about that. It's really more about how you can shine the spotlight on them, make them better, and revel in the fact that you collectively are succeeding. And if it's all about you getting the trophies and piling them up, maybe you're better off staying in the sales department.
Yeah, definitely. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think sometimes people think that you have to advance to be successful. And I don't think that's, definitely not the case.
No,
so,
every manager needs a few superstars.
Yeah.
So, it isn't as though if you pass up that opportunity that you're wimping out or somehow you weren't able to make the grade. On the contrary, you know yourself well enough to know what your strong suits are and you know what you don't want. And bully for you for doing that. I would far rather manage people who understand who they are as individuals rather than try to put, they somehow think they need to scale this mountain that's in front of them when indeed they're really doing well on their own and just staying there would be a success.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. What's kind of next for you? What are your plans?
Wow, you sound like my wife now.
Yeah. Give me that plan. I need to know what's going on.
Andrew, I'm still figuring it out. I would love to tell you I have all my career mapped out right now. There is so much upheaval right now. What I see is a vacuum right now because with as much uncertainty as there is out there, there is such an opportunity for people to lead in many, many ways, not just as a manager of a sports team, but in many other places. And so what I hope to be able to accomplish is through this virtual studio that you all saw here, to be able to deliver several different kinds of programs that will impact people both virtually and in person. There'll be lots of studying that I'll be doing. I'll be adding to my studio here in just a few short days. Amazon trucks, I don't know if it's here yet, but it's coming at some point to be able to equip the studio that I have with doing interviews and live training things that'll be done virtually in a different setting. This monitor behind me, this was just put in 10 days ago. So this is all brand new. Never done these things. And I actually have, this is kind of fun. We'll do this. I'll show you the different view. Andrew, you're never going to have another interview like this again.
Good. I want them to be unique.
Well, this is the view that I'm working on right now. Let me move it in a little bit because it's on this tripod thing. But this will be the view that I work with for some of the live stuff that I do. So we've got this thing right here. Oh, and this changes a bit. Turn it over like this. Anybody getting any ideas right now? So this is where I'll do live things, and I can change. See, it's I have my computer right down here.
Yep.
You all can see this. I'll move it down. I have this little pub table here to where I can put the mic here and some of the other things that I need, but I've got my computer so I can advance my slides and put it right up here.
Nice.
So that my slides are kind of in the background. So I can do some of this and I know exactly what's happening and I can push the buttons down here and make that go and look like I'm not even doing anything. So you don't see my hand. It's like
right. No, that's going to be great. Yeah.
So this is what I hope to do. Every single one of your listeners, and including you, Andrew, have this opportunity in front of us, this chance for us to do something that's bigger than we've ever done before. Sometimes because we have to, and sometimes because we feel like it's time. And there's a little bit of a combination of that for me right now. I really feel like there's a sea change happening and there's a new wave of things coming. And I really want to be on the cutting edge of that wave. And I really feel that it's time for me. And I'm excited. There's a lot of uncertainty, but there's a lot of excitement going too. And so that's what's next for me.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me. I think there's a lot more, so we're going to have you on a couple more times.
We'll go to the next phase. We'll see what happens a month from now when this is all set up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to come back with the whole studio. But no, I greatly appreciate your time talking. It's good to hear some of those things. And me personally, I took some things out of it that I'm going to take back to our team. So cool. I'm looking forward to continuing discussions with you.
I'm thrilled to have been a guest. Thank you so much, Andrew, and good luck to you and the other shows that you have coming up.
Appreciate it.
Hey, podcast fans. Thank you for listening to today's episode of The Andrew Haines Show. If you felt like it was helpful, we'd love it if you'd share it with a friend that you think would get value out of it. Have a great week.